The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with noise. Alien voices mixed together in a sound that hurt human ears. Ambassador Hyun-woo stood at the speaking platform, his hands folded behind his back. He looked calm, but his heart was beating fast. Around him, representatives from dozens of alien races talked among themselves. The tall Valorians with their blue skin and proud faces whispered to each other. The small Nexari with their many eyes counted numbers on glowing tablets. The heavily armored Corvan delegates sat like stone statues, their weapons always visible. Hyun-woo had given speeches here for 5 years. Today would be his last. Honored council members, he began. His voice was steady and clear. The hall slowly grew quiet. I come before you today to make an important announcement. Behind him, Taemin stood in his crisp military uniform. The young officer's face showed nothing, but his eyes were alert. He watched every alien in the room, noting their positions and reactions. The Human Federation has made a decision, Hyun-woo continued. After careful thought, we are ending our membership in the Galactic Council. A wave of shocked sounds filled the hall. Some aliens laughed. Others looked confused. The Valorian Chancellor, Vextar, leaned forward in his floating chair. Ambassador, Vextar said, his voice deep and commanding. Surely you are not serious. Humans have been part of this council for only 20 years. You are still learning how things work. Hyun-woo nodded politely. We have learned much, Chancellor. Perhaps more than you realize. On the far side of the galaxy, Ji-won sat in the command center of Luna Base. Screens surrounded her, showing the status of every human colony, station, and ship. Red lights blinked as evacuation orders went out. Green lights showed missions completed. Mars colony reports all civilians loaded, her assistant said. Industrial equipment is being packed now. Good, Ji-won replied. What about the mining stations in the Kepler system? Shutting down as planned. All valuable materials are being moved to secure storage. Ji-won watched the numbers on her main screen. 300 human settlements across 50 star systems, 2 million people to move, thousands of ships to coordinate. It was the largest operation in human history, and they had to do it without making the aliens suspicious. Back in the council hall, the questions were getting louder. What about your trade agreements? Demanded the Nexari representative, his voice squeaking with worry. You have contracts with 17 different worlds. All contracts will be honored until their end dates, Hyun-woo said calmly. After that, they will not be renewed. And your research stations? Asked a Corvan general. You study our technology. We study yours. This helps everyone. Our research will continue, Hyun-woo replied, but only in human space. Da-yoon sat in the visitors section, taking notes on her tablet. As a scientist who studied alien cultures, she found their reactions fascinating and terrible at the same time. Most of them still did not understand what was happening. The Valorians looked angry because they thought humans were being childish. The Nexari looked worried about their profits. The Corvans seemed confused because they could not imagine leaving a military alliance. None of them asked the important question, why? Da-yoon knew why. She had spent years watching how the council really worked. Humans did the hard work while aliens took the credit. Humans solved problems while aliens argued about who was in charge. Humans built bridges between enemies while aliens planned for war. The other species saw humans as useful servants, not equal partners. They never said this out loud, but their actions made it clear. This is foolish, Vextar declared, standing up from his chair. Humans are young. You do not understand the dangers of the galaxy. Without the Council's protection, you will face threats you cannot handle alone. Hyun-woo smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Chancellor, we have been handling threats for 20 years, often without the Council's help. Taemin's hand moved slightly toward his weapon, not because he expected trouble, but because he had trained himself to be ready. Around the hall, he noticed other hands moving toward weapons too. The tension was growing. You will reconsider, Vextar said. It was not a question or a request. It was a command. No, Hyun-woo said simply. We will not. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Aliens who had never heard a human say no to the council looked shocked. On Earth, Chang-min watched the council session on his private screen. As the leader of human intelligence, he had spent years preparing for this day. His agents had been quietly pulling back from alien worlds for months. Important information had been moved to secure locations. Sensitive projects had been shut down or relocated. The aliens thought they knew everything about human capabilities. They were wrong. Sir, his aide whispered, the Luna base reports Phase 1 is complete. All critical personnel are out of alien space. Changmin nodded. The most dangerous part was over. Now they just had to finish the job. In the council hall, Hyunwoo was gathering his papers. The session was ending, but the aliens were not ready to let him go. Wait, called the Nexari representative. When will you reconsider? In a month? A year? We will not reconsider, Hyunwoo said. This decision is final. But your people benefit from council membership, protested a small alien with green skin. Your colonies get protection. Your traders get access to our markets. Your scientists learn from our research. Hyunwoo paused at the door. For a moment his calm mask slipped and something cold showed in his eyes. And what do you get from us? He asked quietly. The alien opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Around the hall other aliens shifted uncomfortably. They all knew the answer, but none of them wanted to say it out loud. Humans fixed their problems. Humans made their technology work better. Humans found solutions when everyone else gave up. Humans did the jobs that no one else could do or wanted to do. Thank you for 20 years of education, Hyunwoo said. We have learned much about how the galaxy works. Now we will put that knowledge to use. He turned and walked toward the exit. Taemin followed, still watching for threats. The aliens let them go, too shocked to react. As the doors closed behind them, Hyunwoo allowed himself a small smile. The first part was done. Now came the hard work of building something better. Behind them, the council hall erupted in angry voices. But for the first time in 20 years, no human was there to listen or to help solve their problems. The silence that followed would teach them more than any speech ever could. 3 months had passed since the humans left. Kang Ho sat in his small apartment on New Terra, drinking coffee and reading reports on his tablet. The news from the council worlds was not good. Before the humans departed, Kang Ho had been the trade coordinator for the central sector. His job was simple in theory but complex in practice. He made sure that the Nexari merchants, who only cared about profit, could work with the Valorian nobles who cared about honor. He helped the Corvan military traders who wanted everything to be orderly deal with the chaotic free traders of the Rim worlds. For 7 years he had solved problems before they became fights. He knew which Nexari families hated each other. He understood which Valorian houses had ancient grudges. He remembered which Corvan generals could not be in the same room together. Now he was gone and the old hatreds were coming back. His tablet showed the latest news. The Nexari Trade Federation had accused the Corvan hegemony of cheating on shipping contracts. The Corvans claimed the Nexari were lying about cargo weights. Both sides were threatening to cancel their agreements. Kang Ho shook his head. He had seen this exact fight 3 years ago. Back then, he had spent 2 days in meetings, checking records and making phone calls. The problem was simple. The Nexari counted weight differently than the Corvans. Their measurement systems did not match. Once everyone understood this, the fight ended. Now there was no one to explain this to them. The fight was getting worse every day. On the council homeworld, Sujin's replacement was having a very bad morning. The environmental systems that kept the Great Council building working were failing again. The building housed representatives from 12 different species. Each one breathed different air, needed different temperatures, and was comfortable at different humidity levels. The system that balanced all these needs was incredibly complex. Sujin had designed and maintained these systems for 8 years. She understood every pipe, every sensor, every computer program that made it work. When she left, she had given detailed instructions to her replacement team. The problem was that her instructions were based on years of experience and instinct. She knew that when the Valorian section was too cold, you did not just turn up the heat. You had to adjust the air pressure first, then slowly raise the temperature, or the humidity would spike and make the Nexari representatives sick. Her replacement did not know this. Yesterday he had turned up the heat too fast. Now the Nexari section was filled with dangerous mold, and 3 representatives were in the hospital. The new environmental chief, a Valorian engineer named Kextar, stared at Sujin's old computer programs. They were written in human languages and used human mathematics. He could read the basic functions, but he did not understand why the programs worked the way they did. Every system Sujin had built was like this. It worked perfectly when she ran it, but no one else could figure out how to fix it when something went wrong. Kextar had tried calling human technical support, but all the human communication channels were closed. The humans had disconnected everything when they left. In the outer rim, Wu Jin's absence was causing even bigger problems. He had been the unofficial translator for disputes between species whose languages could not be properly converted by computer. The problem was not just words. Different species thought differently, organized ideas differently, even understood time differently. When the crystalline Zephyrians talked about 3 cycles, they might mean 3 days, 3 years, or 3 generations, depending on context. When the gas-dwelling Nebulans mentioned pressure changes, they could be talking about weather, emotions, or political situations. Wu Jin had spent 12 years learning these differences. He could hear what aliens meant, not just what they said. He could explain Zephyrian concepts in ways that Nebulans could understand, and translate Nebulan feelings into Zephyrian logic. Without him, 3 major trade negotiations had collapsed in confusion. The aliens thought they were agreeing to the same things, but they were actually talking about completely different deals. By the time anyone realized the mistake, contracts had been signed and money had changed hands. Now lawyers from 6 different species were arguing about who owed what to whom. The arguments were getting so heated that some worlds were threatening to ban traders from other species entirely. The Valorian Chancellor Vextar sat in his private office, reading reports that made him more worried each day. His economic advisors painted a grim picture. Trade disputes were multiplying. Supply chains were breaking down. 3 minor wars had started over misunderstandings that should have been easily resolved. His military commanders were no happier. The humans had maintained the early warning networks that watched for pirates and raiders. Without those networks, attacks on merchant ships had increased by 300% in just 3 months. The humans had also run the communication relays that let military forces coordinate across vast distances. Those relays were failing one by one and no one knew how to fix them. "We need to contact the humans," his chief advisor said. "Ask them to return or at least help us maintain the systems they built." "Absolutely not," Vextar replied firmly. "The Valorian Empire does not beg for help from children." But privately, he was beginning to understand that the humans were not children. They had been working quietly in the background, solving problems and preventing conflicts. Without them, the galaxy was falling apart. Minho sat in a hidden observation post, monitoring communications across the galaxy. His job was to watch and record, but not to interfere. The human government wanted to know how the galaxy was handling their absence. The answer was, badly. His screen showed increasing chaos on dozens of worlds. The Nexari economy was starting to crash because their trade routes depended on human logistics networks. The Corvan military was struggling with supply problems because human contractors had been managing their warehouses and inventory systems. Even the advanced Valorians were having trouble. Their technology was impressive, but it often broke down in ways they could not predict or fix. Human engineers had been quietly maintaining and improving alien technology for years. Without that support, systems that had worked flawlessly were starting to fail. The most serious problem was medical. Dr. Ye Jin had been the head of the Galactic Medical Exchange, the organization that prevented diseases from spreading between species with different biologies. She had created protocols and systems that protected everyone. Now, without those protections, a minor illness on a Corvan mining world was spreading to other species. The aliens were trying to handle it themselves, but they did not understand how diseases jumped between different types of biology. What was harmless to a Corvan could be deadly to a Nexari and vice versa. Minho watched the medical reports with growing concern. If this outbreak was not controlled soon, it could kill millions of beings across multiple star systems. His orders were clear: observe only, do not help. But watching people die when he knew how to save them was harder than he had expected. He sent a coded message to his superiors. Situation is deteriorating faster than projected. Medical crisis developing. Request permission to provide humanitarian assistance. The response came back within an hour. Negative. Maintain observation protocol. Do not compromise mission security. Minho understood the reasoning. If humans helped too soon, the aliens would not learn the full lesson. They would think they could always rely on human assistance when things got bad. But understanding the strategy did not make it easier to watch the galaxy burn. In the Great Council chambers, emergency sessions were being held every day. Representatives from dozens of worlds reported the same problems. Systems failing, conflicts escalating, trade collapsing. No one wanted to admit the truth that was becoming obvious to everyone. The humans had not just been members of the council. They had been the foundation that held everything together, and now that foundation was gone. 6 months after the human exodus, the galaxy's communication network began to die. Sang-Woo had built most of the hyperspace relay stations that made faster-than-light communication possible. Each station was a marvel of engineering, using quantum entanglement principles that took human scientists 40 years to understand. The aliens used these networks every day, but they had never bothered to learn how they actually worked. Chief Engineer Loktem of the Valorian Technical Corps stared at the diagnostic reports from Relay Station 7. The quantum field generators were losing coherence at a rate of 3% per day. If the trend continued, the entire network would collapse within 2 months. The problem was not mechanical failure. The hardware was fine. The issue was in the mathematical foundations that kept the quantum field stable. Sang-Woo had programmed each relay using human mathematical concepts that were apparently more advanced than anything the aliens had developed. Loktem had studied mathematics for 60 years. He was considered one of the brightest minds in Valorian space. But looking at Sang-Woo's equations was like trying to read a language that used familiar letters to spell completely foreign words. The humans had left detailed technical manuals, but the manuals assumed knowledge that the aliens did not possess. Instructions like, adjust the resonance frequency using Chen-part calculations were meaningless when no one knew what Chen-part calculations were. Sir, his assistant reported, stations 12 and 15 have gone offline completely. We've lost all communication with the Outer Rim territories. Loktem closed his eyes. Without long-range communication, the galaxy was becoming a collection of isolated islands. Governments could not coordinate with their colonies. Military forces could not call for backup. Merchants could not negotiate deals with distant partners. The great galactic civilization was breaking apart one relay station at a time. On the other side of the galaxy, an even worse crisis was developing. The outbreak that had started on the Corvin mining world was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Dr. Yejin's medical protocols had been more sophisticated than anyone realized. She had not just created rules for preventing disease transmission between species. She had built a complex early warning system that could predict how a disease would evolve when it jumped from one biology to another. Without that system, the aliens were always one step behind the outbreak. They would develop a treatment for how the disease affected Corvins, only to discover it had already mutated and was killing Nexari. By the time they adjusted their response, it had changed again and was spreading among the Valorians. Dr. Thexan, the new head of medical coordination, was brilliant by alien standards. But she was trying to fight a war while being blind and deaf. Every decision was based on old information, and every solution came too late. The disease had now reached 17 different star systems. 3 colonies had been completely evacuated. 2 space stations had been abandoned when their life support systems failed. The death toll was approaching 1 million beings. We need the human medical protocols, Dr. Thexan told the Emergency Council. Without their predictive models, we cannot stay ahead of this outbreak. The humans are gone, Chancellor Vexitar replied coldly. We must find our own solutions. Then millions will die, Dr. Thexan said bluntly. The humans understood biological interactions that we have barely begun to study. Their absence is not just inconvenient, it is deadly. Meanwhile, the Council's emergency sessions had become exercises in futility. Without Jae-hyun's quiet diplomatic skills, every meeting devolved into arguments and accusations. The human had never been the loudest voice in the room. He rarely made dramatic speeches or demanded attention, but somehow he had always found ways to help opposing sides find common ground. He would suggest small compromises that satisfied everyone just enough to keep negotiations moving forward. Ambassador Krital of the Nexari had not realized how much he had depended on Jae-hyun's interventions until they were gone. Now simple disputes that should have taken hours to resolve were dragging on for weeks. The latest crisis involved food shipments to 3 worlds suffering from crop failures. The Valorians wanted to provide aid but demanded political concessions in return. The Corvins were willing to send food but wanted to use their own transport ships, which the Nexari considered a security threat. The Nexari offered to handle the logistics but wanted exclusive trading rights for the next 10 years. In the past, Jae-hyun would have suggested dividing the aid operation into smaller parts, with each species handling what they did best. The Valorians could provide funding, the Corvins could supply transportation, and the Nexari could manage distribution. Everyone would get something they wanted, and the hungry worlds would get fed. Now, with no one to suggest such compromises, the three powers were deadlocked while people starved. The economic situation was even worse than the political one. Insu, monitoring galactic commerce from his hidden station, watched the Nexari attempt to replace the human trade networks. The results were catastrophic. Human traders had understood that different species valued different things in ways that could not be reduced to simple mathematics. The Valorians cared about honor and reputation. The Corvins valued reliability and security. The Nexari wanted profit, but they also needed to maintain relationships with their extended families and clan networks. Human trade agreements had been complex documents that took all these factors into account. A typical contract would include clauses about honor, security guarantees, family obligations, and profit sharing. Each species got what they needed most, even if it meant accepting less favorable terms in other areas. The Nexari, trying to replace these agreements, focused only on profit maximization. Their new contracts were simpler and more efficient from a pure economic standpoint. They were also utterly unacceptable to the other species. Valorian nobles refused to sign agreements that did not acknowledge their status and honor. Corvin military commanders would not accept contracts that did not include detailed security provisions. Even other Nexari families found the new agreements too cold and impersonal. Trade volumes had dropped by 60% in 6 months. 3 major shipping companies had gone bankrupt. Currency values were fluctuating wildly as confidence in the galactic economy collapsed. Bo Young, observing from a human research station, documented the social changes that were rippling through alien societies. Her job was to study how different species interacted, and she was witnessing the breakdown of interspecies relations in real time. For 20 years, humans had been the social lubricant that made galactic civilization work. They had hosted diplomatic receptions where natural enemies could meet in neutral territory. They had provided translation services that went beyond language to help different species understand each other's cultural assumptions. They had created entertainment and art that appealed to multiple species, giving aliens common experiences to share. Without these services, the different species were retreating into isolation. Mixed colonies were segregating along species lines. Joint research projects were being abandoned. Cultural exchanges were ending as each species focused on its own problems. The galaxy was not just losing its economic and political unity, it was losing its social cohesion. Dongwu's communication equipment had been busy for weeks. Former alien colleagues were trying to reach him with increasingly desperate messages. Most were asking for technical help or medical advice. Some were offering trade deals or political arrangements. A few were simply asking if the humans might consider returning. All of the messages had the same undertone. We need you. Following his government's instructions, Dongwu had not responded to any of them. But he kept copies of all the messages, documenting how quickly the aliens had gone from dismissing humans as junior partners to begging for their help. The most telling messages came from former friends who had worked closely with humans for years. They wrote about how much they missed not just human technical skills but human perspectives. They described feeling isolated and overwhelmed by problems that they had never had to solve alone before. One message, from a Valorian scientist named Veltar, particularly struck him. We always knew humans were useful. We never realized how much we had come to depend on your way of thinking. Without humans to offer different perspectives, our own thinking has become narrow and circular. We argue about the same solutions to the same problems, over and over, because we cannot see alternatives that now seem obvious by their absence. Dongwu forwarded the message to his superiors with a simple note. The galaxy is learning. The question is whether they will learn fast enough to save themselves. 1 year after humanity's departure, Chancellor Vextar stood in his private office staring out at the capital city below. Half the buildings were dark. Rolling blackouts had become normal as the power grid struggled without human maintenance. In the distance, smoke rose from riots in the merchant district. His pride had cost him an empire. The communication from Earth had arrived that morning. After months of ignored messages and failed attempts to contact human worlds, This one had been different. It came through official diplomatic channels and bore the seal of the Human Federation president. The Human Federation acknowledges the Galactic Council's request for renewed contact. We are prepared to meet with a council delegation at coordinates that will be provided separately. Please limit your delegation to 5 representatives maximum. It was not the desperate plea for reconciliation that Vextar had expected to send. It was an invitation delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the advantages. Sir? His aide entered the office quietly. The other council members are asking about the human response. Should I tell them about the meeting? Yes, Vextar replied, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. Prepare my ship. I will lead the delegation personally. 3 days later, the council ship approached the coordinates humanity had provided. Kyung-soo waited for them in a sleek vessel that made the alien delegates nervous. The ship was clearly human in design, but it was unlike anything they had seen before. The human vessels from 20 years ago had been functional but unremarkable. The ship was elegant and clearly advanced. Its hull seemed to shimmer with energy fields that the alien sensors could not identify. Its engines produced no detectable radiation signature. Council delegation, Kyung-soo's voice came through the communication system, calm and professional. Please follow my ship to the meeting location. Do not deviate from the prescribed flight path. The council ship followed the human vessel through a series of hyperspace jumps. With each jump, the alien delegates grew more uncomfortable. The technology they were observing was clearly far in advance of anything the humans had possessed when they left the council. How is this possible? Whispered the Nexari representative, a nervous trader named Zeklon. They have only been gone for 1 year. How could they advance so quickly? Vextar had been wondering the same thing. The ship they were following demonstrated capabilities that should have taken decades to develop. Either the humans had been hiding their true technological level for 20 years, or they had made impossible advances in a single year. Neither possibility was comforting. Their destination was a space station orbiting a planet the aliens did not recognize. The station was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Council's biggest facilities. It bustled with activity as ships of unknown design came and went. More disturbing was what else they saw in the system. 3 other ships were docked at the station, bearing the markings of species the Council had classified as primitive and ignored. The Kalani, the Mordesh, and the Yutani were all there, apparently as equals rather than subjects. How many species are here? Asked the Corvan general, his voice tight with concern. Unknown, replied the ship's scanner operator. I am detecting at least 12 different hull configurations. Some are human designs, but others are completely unfamiliar. Seungmin met them at the station's docking bay. He was polite but formal, treating the council delegation like visiting dignitaries from a minor power rather than representatives of the galaxy's dominant civilization. Welcome to Harmony Station, he said as he escorted them through corridors that hummed with advanced technology. President Chang-woo is looking forward to speaking with you. The station was a revelation. The aliens saw technology they did not recognize, art that blended multiple species aesthetics, and most surprising of all, beings from different species working together as equals. Humans walked alongside Kalani, Mordesh, and Yutani as colleagues and friends, rather than as superior to inferior. The Kalani were supposed to be barely spacefaring. The Nexari representative whispered to Vextar, "Look at that equipment they are using. It is more advanced than ours." Hayun was waiting in the main conference room, surrounded by holographic displays showing industrial capacity, resource flows, and technological development. The numbers were staggering. In 1 year, humanity and their new allies had built an industrial base that rivaled the entire council's output. "Gentlemen," she said, gesturing to the displays, "let me show you what we have been working on." The presentation was devastating in its implications. Humanity had not just survived their departure from council space. They had thrived in ways that made their former dependence seem like a deliberate choice rather than a necessity. Mining operations extracted resources from asteroid fields the council had never even surveyed. Manufacturing centers produced goods with efficiency levels that made Nexari commerce look primitive. Research facilities had developed technologies that were generations ahead of anything the aliens possessed. But how? Vextar finally asked. 1 year ago, your industrial capacity was a fraction of what you are showing us now. Chang-woo, who had been listening quietly, smiled sadly. Chancellor, Did you ever wonder why human technology seemed to advance so slowly while we were in the council? The question hung in the air. The answer was obvious and terrible. The humans had been deliberately limiting themselves. You were not struggling to keep up with galactic civilization, Vextar realized. You were slowing yourselves down to match our pace. We were being polite, Changwu confirmed. We thought that if we developed too quickly, it would make other species feel inferior. We tried to be good neighbors. Junho stepped forward with a tablet showing trade agreements and technology sharing deals. We also want you to meet our new partners. The Kalani have a gift for biotechnology that surpasses even our capabilities. The Mordesh understand energy manipulation in ways that have revolutionized our power systems. The Yutani have mathematical insights that have solved problems we had been working on for decades. These species were primitive when we left, protested the Corvan general. No, Junho replied firmly. They were ignored. There is a difference. The council classified them as primitive because they had not developed the specific technologies that council species valued, but they had developed other technologies that were far more advanced than anything council species had achieved. He activated a holographic display showing a Kalani bioship that could repair itself and adapt to different environments. Next came a Mordesh energy web that could transfer power across interstellar distances without loss. Finally, a Yutani computational matrix that could predict complex system behaviors with impossible accuracy. While the council was focused on military power and economic control, Junho continued, these species were solving fundamental problems about how life, energy, and information work. We learned more from them in 6 months than we learned from the council in 20 years. The alien delegation sat in stunned silence. Everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization was wrong. The council had not been the pinnacle of development. It had been a stagnant backwater, recycling the same old technologies and ideas while more innovative species were dismissed and ignored. What do you want from us? Vextar asked quietly. Nothing, Changwu replied. We do not need anything from the council. Then why did you agree to this meeting? Changwu looked around the table at the representatives of the galaxy's former rulers. They looked tired, desperate, and defeated. A year ago, they had dismissed humanity as junior partners who should be grateful for council membership. Now they were begging for help from the species they had once looked down upon. Because, Changwu said softly, we still remember being your friends, and friends help each other, even after they have been hurt. He activated a new holographic display showing the medical crisis, communication failures, and economic collapse spreading across council space. We know about the outbreak. We know about the failing infrastructure. We know about the trade wars and the food shortages. Will you help us? Asked Zeklan, his voice barely above a whisper. Changwu looked at each delegation member in turn. That depends. Are you ready to change how the galaxy works? Are you prepared to treat all species as equals rather than ranking them by military power or economic output? Can you accept that the council's way of doing things was wrong? The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Vextar spoke. What would you have us do? End the council as it exists now, Changwu said. Create something new. Something that includes everyone and values all forms of intelligence and capability. Something that serves all species rather than just the powerful ones. And if we refuse? Changwu shrugged. Then you continue trying to solve your problems alone. We will continue building our own civilization with our new partners. The choice is yours. For the first time in galactic history, it was the humans who held all the power in the negotiation. 2 years after humanity's departure, the old galaxy was dying. Changwu stood in the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching council ships arrive for what everyone knew would be the final negotiation. These were not proud delegations coming to dictate terms. These were desperate survivors coming to surrender. The numbers told the story. Half the council worlds had experienced government collapse. 3 major species were facing extinction due to the medical crisis that continued to spread. The galactic economy had shrunk to less than 30% of its former size. Communication networks that had connected thousands of worlds now served barely 200. Mi Young approached him with the latest reports. As humanity's new director of external affairs, she had been documenting the galaxy's collapse with scientific precision. The Valorian Empire has fragmented into 17 separate kingdoms, she reported. The Nixari Trade Federation has lost control of 80% of their commercial routes. The Corvan hegemony is fighting 3 civil wars simultaneously. Chang-Wu nodded grimly. And the outbreak? Contained in human and allied space but still spreading in Council territory. Death toll is approaching 50 million beings. The medical crisis had been the breaking point. Dr. Yejin's replacement systems, working with advanced Kalani biotechnology, had eliminated the plague in human space within months. But the Council species, too proud to ask for help, continued to struggle with treatments that were always one step behind the evolving disease. Sir, Myung continued, Councillor Zeklon has requested a private meeting before the formal negotiations begin. He says it is urgent. Chang-Wu had expected this. Zeklon had been the most reasonable of the Council representatives during their previous meetings. He was also smart enough to understand that the Council's position was hopeless. The meeting took place in a small conference room, decorated with art from a dozen different species. Zeklon looked exhausted. His once bright scales were dull, and his many eyes showed the strain of months without adequate sleep. President Chang-Wu, he began without preamble. How long have you been planning this? Chang-Wu had been asked this question many times over the past year. The aliens could not believe that humanity's departure had been spontaneous rather than part of some elaborate strategy. We were not planning anything, Chang-Wu replied honestly.
We were hoping. Hoping for what?
That you would prove us wrong about what kind of galaxy this was. Chang-Wu activated a holographic display showing historical data. For 20 years, we tried to be good council members. We shared our technology freely. We solved problems for everyone. We mediated disputes. We built infrastructure that served all species equally. The display showed chart after chart of human contributions to galactic civilization, medical advances that had saved billions of lives, engineering projects that connected isolated worlds, diplomatic initiatives that had prevented dozens of wars. And how did the Council respond? Chang-Wu asked. By taking credit for our work. By treating us as useful servants rather than equal partners. By making it clear that we would never be anything more than junior members of your civilization. Zeklon's scales shifted color in a pattern that indicated shame. We did not realize. Yes, you did, Chang-Wu interrupted gently. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just did not think we would ever do anything about it. The accusation hung in the air between them. It was true, and both of them knew it. What do you want from us now? Zeklon asked. Complete restructuring of galactic governance, Chang-Wu replied, pulling up a document that had been prepared months earlier. Equal representation for all species, including the ones you previously ignored. Genuine cooperation instead of hierarchical control. And most importantly, recognition that intelligence and worth are not measured by military power or economic dominance. Zeklon studied the proposed agreement. It was comprehensive and fair, but it would end the Council's dominance forever. The other species will never agree to this, he said. You are asking them to give up everything they have worked for. No, Chang-Wu corrected. I am asking them to give up everything they have stolen. The Council's power was built on exploiting smaller species and taking credit for work done by others. That ends now, and if they refuse? Chang-Wu gestured toward the observation windows where Council ships hung in space like dying animals. Then they continue to collapse while we build a better civilization with species that understand the value of true cooperation. The formal negotiations began the next day. The Council delegation was larger this time, including representatives from dozens of worlds that had previously been considered too minor to matter. Desperation had forced them to seek help from anyone who might have solutions. Chang-Wu opened the session with a simple statement. The old galaxy is dead. We are here to decide what will replace it. The negotiations were unlike anything in galactic history. For the first time, humans held all the advantages. They had the technology, the resources, the allies, and the moral authority. The Council had nothing but their desperate need. Species that had barely been acknowledged by the Council found themselves with equal voices in discussions about the galaxy's future. The Kalani presented their biotechnology as an alternative to the failing medical systems. The Mordesh offered energy solutions that could rebuild collapsed infrastructures. The Yutani shared computational methods that could optimize resource distribution across thousands of worlds. One by one, the Council representatives began to understand what they had lost when they dismissed these species as primitive. The negotiations lasted for 3 weeks. When they were finished, The Galactic Council as it had existed for millennia was officially dissolved. In its place, the new galactic cooperation emerged. Every species had an equal voice. Decisions were made by consensus rather than by the dominance of major powers. Technology and resources were shared freely rather than hoarded by the strong. Most importantly, the new government recognized multiple forms of intelligence and contribution. Military power was no longer the primary measure of a species' worth. Scientific advancement, artistic achievement, philosophical insight, and social innovation all carried equal weight in the new system. Ji-hun commanded the first exploration fleets of the new era. His ships were crewed by beings from 17 different species, working together as equals rather than as masters and servants. Their mission was to find other isolated species that might have been overlooked or dismissed by the old council. Early reports suggested that the galaxy contained hundreds of intelligent species that had been ignored because they did not fit the council's narrow definitions of civilization. Each new contact brought fresh perspectives and capabilities. A species of living crystals that could manipulate gravity, gas beings that understood stellar physics in ways no solid creature could comprehend, mechanical intelligences that had evolved in the cores of dead stars. The galaxy, it turned out, was far more diverse and wonderful than the council had ever imagined. Young-Soo was part of the first generation of humans born after the Exodus. At 8 years old, he attended school with children from 6 different species. To him, this was normal. The idea that some species might consider themselves superior to others was as foreign as slavery had been to his parents' generation. His teacher, So Young, often used their diversity as a teaching opportunity. When Young-Soo asked why some of the older alien visitors seemed nervous around humans, she took the class to the observation deck where they could see the stars. Long ago, she explained, the galaxy was ruled by fear. Strong species controlled weak ones. Smart species looked down on different ones. Everyone thought that being powerful meant being important. That sounds stupid, Young-Soo said with the blunt honesty of childhood. It was, So Young agreed. But it was also all they knew. Humans showed them a different way. We proved that leaving a bad situation and building something better was more powerful than trying to control others. Is that why they seem scared? Asked Mei Lin, a young Kalani student whose bioluminescent patches flickered with curiosity. They are not scared of us, So Young explained. They are scared of what they learned about themselves. For the first time, they had to face the fact that their civilization was not as great as they thought it was. Young-Soo considered this carefully. Will they be okay? So Young smiled, looking out at the ships from dozens of different species that now shared the same space in peace and cooperation. They are learning, and that is the most important thing any of us can do. The galaxy had learned the most human lesson of all, that true strength came not from dominating others, but from lifting everyone up together. And in the end, that lesson had transformed not just human civilization, but the entire galaxy. The Council's reign was over, not because humanity had conquered it, but because humanity had made it irrelevant, and in doing so, they had given the galaxy something far better than empire. They had given it hope.